Hello, and a very warm welcome to the Total Saints podcast. We are the weekly Saints podcast, your home for all things Southampton Football Club. This podcast is being live streamed on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, and on YouTube. We're going to be checking your comments as we go through the show. So if you're watching live and you've got something to say, do get involved in the conversation. Now, our podcast is entirely supported by our loyal Patreon community because without you, we couldn't make the show each week. And we've got 3 new patrons who've joined us in the last 7 days, which is great news. So can I start by saying a huge thank you and a massive welcome to Richard White, Max Sopel, and Justin Tracy, who've joined our Bobby Stokes tier. We really do appreciate your support, and I'll have more on how you can join us coming up at the end of the show. Now, this week on the podcast, Nathan Tella is the latest player to depart the club at the time of recording. We'll have a look at what that means for the team going forward. It was a third win of the new campaign with a 2-1 victory over Queen's Park Rangers at St Mary's this weekend. As always, plenty of talking points to tackle there. The final game before the first international break is a trip to Sunderland on Saturday. Going to preview that game. And with the summer transfer window closing at 11 o'clock on Friday, we're going to have a look ahead to what could be a busy week. My name's Martin Starke, and I'm joined by our regular contributors, Steve Grant, who's the owner of SaintsWeb. Glen Cour is the writer of the blog League One -10, and Alfie House is the Saints reporter at the Southern Daily Echo. All underpinned by our TSP patrons. This is episode 241 of the Total Saints podcast. Now, before we get into the football, last week we had a message from Paul, who was listening in New Zealand, which prompted our TSP Most Distant Listener Award. Paul is based in Gisborne, which is in New Zealand. Now, we worked that out to be 11,600 miles from Southampton. Loads of people got in touch, but we think 5 of you are based slightly further away than Paul. So in order of closest to Southampton, according to Google, hello to Josh Tizard, who's in Wellington. He says, "Hi, lads. I'm a listener from Wellington. I live approximately 11,740 miles away from Southampton, born and raised Saints fan, and this is my 3rd season of listening to you on the podcast." So thanks for your message, Josh. Richard Sutcliffe is in Christchurch. He says, "Not wanting to hijack your podcast with Southern Hemisphere listeners, but I can beat the Gisborne guy as Christchurch is 11,848 miles away." Thank you, Richard. Another Richard North, is also in Christchurch. He says, "I enjoy watching you guys on YouTube. I've supported Saints since 1974. I last saw Saints when visiting family back in 2018. My first and only visit to St Mary's. The game that day was Stoke. So, sorry, it wasn't a better game." Martin Hayward is in Balcouda, which is 11,912 miles away. He says, "Hi, guys. I love the show. I'm a regular listener and was originally from Woolston and moved to New Zealand with my wife, a Kiwi girl, back in 1994. We thought that might be the furthest, but Misha Craig is on YouTube in Dunedin in New Zealand, which is 11,921 miles away. So we think that Misha might be the winner by about 10 miles. Shall we talk about some football?
Yeah.
It was confirmed first thing this morning that Nathan Tella has joined Bayer Leverkusen for 20 million. Another copy and paste on the official announcement said, "Although disappointed to lose such a talented homegrown player," etc., etc., etc. Glenn, I was surprised that it's 6 years he's been at Southampton. I can't help but feel a little underwhelmed by not only the move, but also his contribution in that time.
Yeah, it's not been very much. I mean, his main contribution has been for Burnley on loan. So going from memory, he was kicked out of Arsenal Academy, or not taken up by Arsenal at 17, joined us, was in the academy for a couple of years, suffered a bad injury, which we obviously, supported him through, and he came back. And if memory serves, I think we gave him a contract whilst he was injured. He sort of extended his contract when a lot of clubs wouldn't have done. He got his chance in the Premier League under Ralph and really didn't do much. I think it was 40 odd appearances. I can only remember a couple of goals, and then it got to the stage where we were beginning to wonder if there was actually a player in there. He was 23 or something, despite the fact we were still calling him Star Boy, which I always found incredibly irritating. And he went up to Burnley and did really, really well at championship level. And he came back, and I kind of thought that this is the year that he's actually going to pay back some of that support that we've shown him over the 7 years. But 3 games and he's off. So this one actually annoys me more than Ward-Prowse leaving, or more than because he gave 10 years of his adult career, if you like, and Livramento and Lavia were bought to sell on, so we kind of knew that was the deal there. But with this one, I think, I was expecting him to sort of stay this year, but it's a great opportunity for him. It's a good club he's joining. I'm just a little bit disappointed that I don't feel we've had any sort of payback for, and it's a gamble by Leverkusen, because they paid 20 million quid for a player who's not proven above championship level. So good luck to him. He's head through gritted teeth, but it's annoying because it's a player who probably would have scored 15 goals if he'd been in the team this year, and we're now going to have to replace that.
I know you've been looking at some of the stats today, Steve. Is 20 million good business for someone that doesn't want to be here and has been angling for that move pretty much all summer?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, when you look at the raw output of what he's provided for us in his time, then yes, that's excellent business for a guy who is completely unproven, or, I mean, depending on which way you want to look at it, proven to not quite be at the level, maybe. At the top level. So a club like Bayer Leverkusen, who are in Europe next season, putting that much money on the table for him, I find absolutely extraordinary. And we've done really well to get that fee for him, I think. I mean, Leverkusen are an interesting side. They look, at the moment, they look like the potential challenger to Bayern Munich this season based on their early performances. Dortmund look a little bit ropey, Leipzig likewise. But they've got Xabi Alonso as manager, who's seems to be very highly rated, seems to be kind of seen as the next Pep, or however you want to describe the next coming of sort of young coaches coming through. But they've had this weird fascination with young English right wingers in the last couple of years, where they got Damari Gray from Leicester and sold him to Everton 6 months later. And they had Callum Hudson-Odoi on loan from Chelsea last season, who more or less did very little. So Tella going in basically to play exactly the same role. It'd be fascinating to see how he gets on. But at the moment, I would say we've probably got the better of that deal in terms of the two clubs. But I mean, as ever, you never quite know. He might tear it up in Germany against the slightly ropier Bundesliga defences, but we'll see.
And you'd assume Alfie, or in fact the club have said that they're going to look to actively replace him this week. So they would have known about this, and Russell Martin was, I think he said, disappointed, didn't he? But you would think that they've got somebody in mind ready to go. Yeah,
I think the price tag for Nathan Tella was set maybe 2 or 3 months ago. I think, as Steve alluded to, they've actually done quite well to get that exact price tag up to 20 million. Maybe it's 18 million up front and a couple add-on, not too sure. It was a bit of a meltdown, wasn't it, to be fair? Was it Friday evening? On the internet, the news went out, must have been out about 11 p.m. and it was carnage on the timeline, sort of responding to it, people thinking that Ryan Fraser was the replacement, and I can certainly understand why they felt that way. But I think Ryan Fraser did really well to show supporters what he can offer this season. But Russell Martin said that he's not the replacement. But Ryan Fraser is not the replacement of Nathan Tella, and they will reinvest some of that money. I doubt they're going to spend 20 million quid on a player. That's probably not going to happen. But they would like to think they'll get somebody in. I know we've seen this Joseph Paintsil fella from Genk linked, but I don't know too much about him. It sounds like he's angling for Leeds anyway, so I'd rather probably not him if you could. But I think overall, to sort of leap to the defence of Tella a little bit, well, I do agree with Glen and Steve, but in all the interactions I've had with him, he's a great lad. Nobody's got a bad word to say about him. And I think it is a really good opportunity to go in and try and replace Moussa Diaby, who, as Aston Villa has shown, clearly is a very good player. It's a tough job. But I don't think you can hold it against him. I think the club have been sort of aware that he probably would leave for a while. Russell Martin said at the start of August that there's going to be players that play 3 or 4 games and they do leave. We just need to see the club get somebody in quickly now, because we don't want to be in a situation like last August where you've got Gonzalo Ramos apparently at the door, Cody Gakpo at the door, and then none of them actually come in. So it's an important week.
Do you think the mistake was loaning him out last season, Glenn, in hindsight?
In hindsight, no, not really. I think it was a mistake not to bring him back because we signed, apparently we could have bought him back, but we let Nathan the
In
Genius
January,
decide.
you mean? January.
We let Nathan the Genius decide not to do that, and instead we paid 22 million for Sulemana.
My understanding, Glenn, is that Nathan didn't want to come back in January. So.
Yeah, but it's all about what Nathan wants, isn't it? At some point we've got to think about what does the club need. He would have been certainly nowhere. You think about the rubbish we had playing on the wings last year. He would certainly have made a difference last year. Might not have torn it up or scored 10 goals or whatever, and we probably would have gone down anyway. Almost certainly would have done. But in hindsight, that was a bad decision not to bring him back in January, I think. But loaning him out at the start of last year, I think, was probably the right thing to do, because he had 2 years in and around the first team squad in the Premier League and not done anything.
Well, we'll get on to all the transfer gossip and who may or may not come in. A couple of new signings as well to talk about as we go. A great win again. Well, a win. We maintained the unbeaten start to the Championship season, beating QPR at St Mary's 2-1, winning at home for the first time since March, which was lovely. Steve, given all the noise off the pitch, decent results. Wasn't the best game I think we've seen, but a win's a win.
Yeah, as you say, a win's a win, and we got stumbled over the line somehow. I mean, QPR can feel probably slightly aggrieved that they've not taken at least something from that game, but ultimately the quality in the two boxes was the difference. I mean, Adam Armstrong has somehow managed to kind of control the ball with both of his shins and then ping it in the corner for the winner. I mean, from my view, I'm in the northern stand, so I'm about as far away from that incident as I could possibly be, and from 90, 100 yards away, that looks like an absolutely world-class first touch where he's just taken it in, dummied the defender and given himself a little bit of room and then smashed it in the corner, whereas actually the ball has been fired at him and he's miscontrolled it and it's wrong-footed the defender and he smashed it in the corner. But at the end of the day, it kind of worked the same way, and it's a great finish.
Is it 4 goals in 4 games?
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we knew that he's a proven goal scorer at Championship level, and he is living up to that so far. So yep, all good. Overall performance, we were stodgy, I thought. There was a lot.
That's a good word. That's a great way of summing up.
There was a lot of part. It was one of those games that I think we were probably warned about by other fans of other Championship clubs who had seen Russell Martin's Swansea team in the last 2 years, where a lot of the passing did seem to kind of be a little bit for passing's sake. We didn't really move QPR around too much. Part of that was because they defended so deep, and therefore they were there kind of wasn't really the space to do so. But there were times where we just didn't quite have the bravery to make the pass through the lines at times. There were a lot of good sort of little movements where players like Mara, second half when he was on, he quite often made a little dart into a space, quite a tight space, but a passable space between midfielders. But we weren't quite brave enough to play the pass for risk of giving it away. And that basically meant that QPR could kind of sit, and we were playing in front of them, and they were quite happy with that situation. And they looked to hit us on the break, and Manning and Walker-Peters were often caught ahead of the ball at times, and we were fortunate. I mean, especially second half, that their finishing wasn't up to scratch. Hit the bar, one hit straight at Bazunu right at the start of the second half. And the one right at the very end where I've no idea what the guy's trying to do in that situation. You're 8 yards out and there's nobody to pass to, and he's tried to knock it sideways. Just hit it. But yeah, so we got away with it to an extent. I mean, how much of that was kind of a little bit of confusion with the system where we had to move people about when Jack Stevens went off? You could probably credit a bit of that, but I don't think we looked especially organised beforehand, to be honest. So yeah, I mean, plenty to work on, but I think given the relative upheaval in the day or two before, I mean, we always knew there were going to be these games where there's going to be rumours and there's going to be people being pulled out of the squad at fairly late notice ahead of games, and it's going to be a little bit chaotic before the closing of the transfer window. And I think given the fixtures we've had so far, I mean, you take the run of our first 8 games, and if you were to pick any one of them where you knew you were going to be without both Tella and Shea Adams, I think QPR at home would have been the one that you'd have chosen. And ultimately, we kind of got away with a slightly mediocre performance because of the quality we've still got in the final third. So yeah, I mean, I think ultimately, I mean, a bit of a cliche, but if you win when you're playing badly, you're not doing too much wrong.
No, we'll look back on those points at the end of the season, hopefully, favourably. Glenn, I mean, Steve touched on it then, but both the goal scorers from last week were missing. Tella, obviously, having his medical. Che, head not in the game, or a lot of noise around him. For a rapidly depleting squad like ours, that had the potential to be an issue for a number of reasons, but they managed to pull together and get the result.
Yeah, I mean, for every game we've played so far, the squad, the first 11 has probably been weaker every week, either through players leaving or, when Smallbone got injured, things like that. They will have practiced this week, probably until Thursday, probably with Tella and Adams in the team. And then on Friday, they probably had to throw all that out and push Adam Armstrong back up front. Where bizarrely, despite he's played his whole career there, all of a sudden he looks so much better when he's got a little bit of space. If he drops into that number 8 position, and I think that was part of the reason we were stodgy, because he was sort of playing up front against Steve Cook and the other centre half, and they're playing very deep. There was no space for him, so he was getting frustrated and trying to move into wide areas. So occasionally when Adozie had the ball, there was like no one in the middle. And all this stuff. And in the first half in particular, it was only Adozie who looked like he had a way to go. Sam Ammo found it very difficult in his first start. Their left back was decent. So it's a world of, I think we alluded to this last week, it's a world of difference starting a game than it is to coming on with 20 minutes to go. So yeah, we were stodgy is exactly the word. Further disruption, obviously, with Stevens going off. Thought it was interesting that he brought on Downs instead of Bella-Kotchap, who was the obvious like-for-like replacement on the bench. But I was impressed with Downs. He's got a bit of personality about him, and I think he'll be a very good player for us. Just how they fit him and Shea Charles in the team is going to be an interesting one going forward. But Charles will probably be used as a centre half more often than not if the worst fears are confirmed about Jack's injury. So yeah, it was. Yeah, it was a game that we got done, and I think the players need to be applauded for getting it done, given the disruption that happened. And I'd like to say I thought Jan Bednarek had a really good game against because their centre forward was a handful, and he
was tricky, wasn't he? First half.
Well, he was that horrible combination of very quick and very strong. For a defender, that's a nightmare. And the way QPR were playing was basically 10 behind the ball, very deep. Hit it long to him and see what he could do. And there was one in the first half where I think Bednarek got caught out by his pace a little bit and was very, very lucky to get given a free kick over in the sort of right back area. But after that, you noticed he played him a lot better, and he started blocking the runs and letting Charles sweep up and all this sort of stuff. And in the second half, Sinclair Armstrong, and that he got very frustrated, and he started to make bad decisions because he just wasn't getting enough of the ball. So that
he
ultimately
cramped up quite early as well. He was stretching from about the hour mark.
Yeah, I mean, the lad last week said he was injured the week before and not sure where he's going to play. But he looked a very, very promising player, I have to say. Be interesting to see how he gets on, how his career goes this season and beyond. But yeah, pleased to get it done, I think.
Do you agree, Alfie? I was thinking, mentally what that home win will do for the squad and the supporters, because it's been a while, and we were talking about the expectation that this was the game that we were going to finally win at home, and it was a bit touch and go for a bit, wasn't it? So to get it over the line, I think there was almost a bit of relief at the full-time whistle.
I think we said that before Norwich as well, to be fair, because we didn't realise they'd be quite the package they are. But, Russell Martin says it's been quite interesting after the game. He thinks the players are still, he calls it tension, but he thinks they're pretty nervous playing at home, basically, because of how poorly it went last season, and just I think that some of them maybe feel that they just let everybody down, which obviously to an extent some of them did. So I think that there is that, and they've got to try and get over that. But Russell was the right guy for that. What I would say is that he's absolutely right to point out the fact they've conceded, I think, 3 minutes after scoring, 2 minutes after scoring, and 2 minutes after scoring in 3 consecutive games. Which is not right, is it? You can't go into matches knowing that if you're going to score a goal. I know it's cliche that you're the most vulnerable, but 3 times in a row they've given up a lead, and they've managed to get it back each time, fortunately, or in Norwich case, not quite actually. So there's definitely things to work on, but I agree. I think it's just at this point, this is the last game where they're going to have this problem where you're going to have players pulling out 2 days before. Sunderland, the way that you'd like to think that the team will be slightly more settled by then. There might be some late movement. Maybe Che Adams, maybe Crystal Palace or Fulham firm up a little bit of interest in him and maybe make a move. But it sounds like Everton's probably not going to be a destination, so you like to think he might be back in next week. But yeah, I think that to come through all the disruption they've done really well. And I thought, like I say, Flynn Downs off the bench was really good. Shea Charles, apart from one moment where he let Elias Chair just sort of stroll across the box and then fire at Bazunu from about 4 or 5 yards out, I thought he did really well. And I thought Bazunu saved that really well as well. I thought it was a good game for Bazunu, actually, even though he did have another one of his parries where it went in, but luckily Sinclair was offside. We've got away with that a couple of times now. But yeah, I think just getting the result was the most important thing, and they've done that.
And just on Jack Stevens, what was the update afterwards? Is it going to be a scan on Monday? And
yeah, there'll be a scan. There was no specific update on what the injury was, but it looked to me like it was his ankle. The boot was down. He wasn't in a good way. Yeah, Russell might have said that you have to fear the worst, and it's a real negative for them. But Mason Holgate suddenly looks like a really good signing now, a really smart bit of business. And I think they're very much still in for Nathan Wood as well. I know the Swansea manager said that he's not going to be leaving and stuff like that, but I think Mason put them in a really good position where they no longer needed a defender, and that Nathan Wood was a bit of a luxury signing. That's been taken away a little bit now, where they probably do need another one, especially if Lianco's on the way, as we've seen him pictured in Qatar this evening. So they might have to put the price tag up for Nathan Wood a little bit.
We mentioned Flynn Downs briefly, decent debut coming off the bench. I want to talk about Ryan Fraser, Steve. I thought he looked all right. I thought when he came on, he made some decent runs. They weren't necessarily spotted. Was it an abysmal signing? Is that how you framed it? On
it was
on Friday? Absolutely abysmal signing. Frankly, I think was what you said. So
yeah.
did he do anything to change your mind yesterday? And by the way, you're not the only one to have said that.
So my kind of justification for that choice of words was basically just from all the off-field stuff, the attitude situation where, like, his last 2 clubs where he's moved to them, he's basically down tools. At Aberdeen, he went on strike to force a move to Bournemouth. And at Bournemouth, Project Restart, he basically said, "No, I'm not going to sign that short-term extension to get us through and give you a chance of staying up, because I don't want to jeopardise my my big money free transfer move, sort of in the coming months." Which I mean, on a professional level, on a sort of career level, kind of I guess it's kind of what most people would do, but it's just the optics of it, and it just comes across as him kind of being very selfish and not a team player, and it feels like the environment that we're cultivating here this season is very much on the sort of old school All Blacks kind of no dickheads policy, isn't it? It's very much on the line of, right, yeah, we obviously want quality players, but your attitude and the way that you apply yourself is as important, if not more so. And yeah, I just kind of, my concern is that come sort of two or 3 months down the line, maybe his attitude isn't quite what we need in the sort of winter battle months where you're going to Rotherham in the hammering rain and trying to grind something out. But I mean, purely from an ability perspective, I don't think there's an awful lot of question really, other than he's not played very much in the last 2 or 3 years. But yeah, I mean, certainly what we saw yesterday in that relatively brief cameo, yeah, I mean, it's odd, isn't it, finally having a winger that is quite happy to run in a very straight line. We've not seen that for a while, so that gives us a variation in terms of the style of the wingers that we've got, because obviously both Edozie and Sam Ammo they both tend to play on the opposite flank and want to more often than not want to cut in, or if they do go down the outside, it's kind of quite rare. But Fraser seems to be the sort of guy who's going to basically just run past the fullback and try and put a cross in. The quality of the balls in were very good, but our problem, as ever, is getting enough bodies in the box. Because unfortunately Charlie Alcaraz wasn't. He's kind of the guy that's got to be the link. He's got to be the one from the midfield that is busting a gut to get in the box and support the attackers. And he just had one of his occasional games where he was just all over the place, and it just nothing quite fell for him. And unfortunately, when he's having those games, you do notice, because our attacking output drops massively. So yeah, that's somewhere. I mean, possibly. I mean, maybe the answer is occasionally Stu Armstrong plays a slightly more advanced role. I guess we kind of see how Russell Martin kind of juggles with that over the coming weeks, because I'm sure there will be games where there's a bit of rotation just for freshness more than anything. And we've got a midweek game coming up next week, and we get Ipswich, so I imagine there'll be changes between Saturday's game and Tuesday night. So yeah, maybe that's one of the ones where you take Alcaraz out the firing line and just try something slightly different.
I think your tweet might have made it to the gaffer, Steve, because when he came in, he said that he's been made aware there's a bit of negativity around the signings, and he sort of launched a bit of an appeal to sort of get behind them. So maybe you've made it there.
I mean, look, I'll always support players that want to come and play for us. It was just concern at kind of the character, really, and it's. I mean, it's not even been an isolated incident. That's the main concern. If it's happened like once at a club 10 years ago, then okay, fine, things happen. But if you've done it, if it's kind of happened repeatedly, then that's a bit of a pattern and a slight concern for me.
What did you make of the signing, Glenn? Were you a bit sceptical? Because we were saying we need people that have got a bit of experience to come in, and you think the young wingers might learn a bit from him, even if it's just a bit more of the dark arts or that will to win. I think he's going to add just some experience that we're lacking, really.
On the pitch, I didn't really have an issue with it at all. I had the same concerns that Steve had for the same reasons. And that's all there is to say, really, about it. You know, he's a Premier League level player, or he was, certainly when he was at Bournemouth and probably in his first year at Newcastle. So to get a player like that to come in, for depth reasons, if nothing else, I thought, yeah, it's a good signing from that point of view, because you've got, you know, Edozie, who's only 19 or whatever it is. So you've got Sam Ammo, who's 15 or whatever. You know, you've got very, very young players there, and we've all seen what happens with young players. They play a few games, they get injured, then you've got to have someone to come in and do a job, and that's been part of our problem over the last couple of years. We just haven't had those players to come in. I mean, we've got, you know, Joe Aribo and Musa Gineppo, who at the moment, and you know, and certainly Fraser is a massive upgrade on them to come in and play that wide position. I mean, he can play both sides as well. So I was interested to see him play on the left, and Edozie got pushed right. So yeah, it'd be interesting to see how that one develops, because Edozie is a lot more comfortable on the left as well. So if those two are in the team on Saturday, it'll be which is probably what will happen. Looking at it at the moment, you know, looking at it right now, obviously things might change with players leaving and coming in and whatnot, but yeah, it'd be interesting to see how they line up. But yeah, I exactly the same as Steve, really. Maybe not quite so vociferously, but exactly the same concerns that, you know, over time we'll see, you know, the true character will come out. So hopefully he, I mean, he's been sold as a player who's kind of lost his way a couple of years ago.
Point to prove.
Last couple of years, point to prove. Russell Martin knows him, so that's all good. We just got to hope that is the case, and he keeps his head down and proves us wrong.
I'd put him forward for Player of the Week. I thought, considering he only came in on Friday and has not played much, came off the bench, and we started to look more of a threat down that side. I thought he was in with a shout. I think
what he did do was he lifted the crowd, didn't he? Because it was a really flat same areas. It might have been 30,000 Saints fans, but to be honest, the atmosphere was really flat for 60, 65 minutes. And then I thought that as soon as he came on, just getting at the fullback, getting crosses in, as Steve said, some really good deliveries. Obviously, nobody there to meet them. The crowd reacted to that, and I think that played a big part in the winner.
Do you think the flat atmosphere was down to what had gone on with Nathan Tella and Shay Adams? I just couldn't help but think that maybe everyone's a bit down on that. I mean, Saints.
Well, I heard there was fighting in the chapel stand apparently, or some altercations. I don't know if that's
Not
true.
around
I
me,
don't know.
But I found it. I mean, the club were. We had the 2 loan signings and we had Tella leaving, and it was like bury the bad news a little bit, and then they announced Will Smallbone's contract, and I'd be interested to know what everyone thinks, whether that sort of contributed to the slightly flat atmosphere, because it was very flat compared to the Norwich game. Well, I know the Norwich game was mad, and there were goals flying in all over the place.
Well,
I think to be fair, the football would have played a part.
Yeah,
the football wasn't great in the first half.
QPR came with a plan to kind of unsettle us, and to be honest, it pretty much worked perfectly.
Yeah.
And as a result, we were I think as a fan base, it was like, oh, this isn't going to work. We're not going to score 4 goals every week.
Yeah.
This is somewhat disappointing. So yeah, I think it's partly that. Partly we just didn't. I think the energy that we showed in the game, in the Norwich game, I think is what lifted the crowd. And as you rightly say, Alfie, when Fraser came on and he got down the line a couple of times, put some fizzing balls across the box, all of a sudden people got up a bit more. And yeah, we were just lacking that a little bit for the first hour or so, I think. But yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, we're still a fan base that's recently not accustomed to seeing winning football, so it's all a little bit alien to us at the moment, isn't it?
I was fuming because I got caught in the downpour outside the ground when it started hailstone. And it ruined my mac and cheese. So I was in a foul mood for like the first 15 minutes, and there was nothing I saw on the pitch that was going to improve my mood.
My t-shirt was still wet when I got home at about 8 o'clock.
Oh, it's terrible. So, player of the week then, before we move on, Glenn.
In my tradition of picking a defender, and I know no one else will, I'll go for Jan Bednarek. Good shout. Alfie?
I guess in my tradition of picking Adam Armstrong every week, I should probably just pick Adam Armstrong again. So I'll do that.
And Steve? No imagination at all, Alfie.
I'll go for the...
Ryan Fraser?
That would be a turn up for the books, wouldn't it? No, I think I'm going to go for Ryan Manning for weirdness. Basically,
I like that.
There seems to be this very strange undercurrent within the fan base that Ryan Manning is having terrible games of football, and yet he's got 4 assists. We've got 10 points from 12, and both fullbacks are playing exactly the way that the manager wants them to. I mean, the slip against Plymouth and kind of a slip against Norwich, those can happen to any defender, and it's not that he's having a bad game. And I think, I think Manning and Nadozie in that first half were basically our only attacking outlet. And Manning and kind of Fraser and a little bit of Armstrong dropping deep, a little bit of Mara as well thrown into the mix were kind of the main attacking outlet second half. So we've got to remember, don't forget our last promotion season out of the Championship, we had a left back who Danny Fox got something like 15 assists from left back, and yet all the fans hated him. It was mental. We do have this weird thing where we pick a player that suddenly we just don't like for unspecified reasons, and it's baffling. So yeah, he's my pick.
Fair enough. Next up, Saints travel 315 miles north to Sunderland. It's a 12:30 kickoff at the stadium. I mean, fair play to anyone who's going to be travelling up there. We don't know too much about them, I guess, Glenn. I mean, we've had some decent wins against them over the years, but I don't think we'll go there and be too afraid, given I think they beat Rotherham 2-1 last week, maybe held Coventry to a draw at the weekend, so they haven't set the league alight.
They seem to be a team in the image of their manager, Tony Mowbray, so it's kind of tough, but practical, I'd say, as a team. I haven't seen too much of them, I have to say. I've seen their results, same as everyone else has, and it seems to be very close games. They lost at home to Ipswich on the opening day, and their only other home game was a 2-1 win against Rotherham, who were going to be one of the teams down in the bottom. So, I mean, Sunderland were in the playoffs last year and got knocked out by Luton, I think. So you'd anticipate them being one of the better sides this year. But as Steve told me before the game, I'm not going to claim this as knowledge. They had the lad on loan from Man United last year, Ahmad Diallo, who tore up the league, and they haven't got him this year. So it's a bit like Middlesbrough with losing their best player from last year, and now they're struggling. So I'm not thinking this is the sort of intimidating game that you might have necessarily thought going to Sunderland. So I'm quite confident we can go there and get something out of it.
Are you confident as well, Steve? What have you made of their start?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, they evidently don't look as potent as they were last season. They went on a really strong run at the back end of the season to sneak into the playoffs right at the very last minute, thanks to Millwall's collapse at home to Blackburn on the final day. So they properly sneaked in. They weren't really proper contenders as such, I guess, for the vast majority of the season, but they got their act together as a result of key attacking players. So Diallo, as Glen mentioned, and also the centre forward Ross Stewart, who's out injured at the moment. I think he's probably going to be out for another month or so. And I think without those two, they're just lacking a little bit of a spark up front. Defensively, they seem to be relatively sound, as most Tony Mowbray sides are, I guess, in the Championship. It's when they get up to the top flight that they tend to struggle quite badly. But yeah, Sunderland, they look like they're going to be one of those sides who are hard to beat, but will probably give you a little bit of a chance, especially at home, because big crowd, and there'll be an expectant crowd, and they'll be expecting Sunderland to attack us. They won't want to see their team sit deep like QPR did yesterday and try and play on the counter attack, because they're at home and they think they've got bigger ambitions than that. And I think that pressure brings a lot of difficulty for them, really, because I mean, frankly, they only got promoted out of League One a year ago. So for them to have got into the playoffs was a massive overachievement. But yeah, obviously once you've set that benchmark, you're expected to at least maintain that. But I mean, not everybody can always improve on last season, because otherwise there would never be a top of the league. So I mean, I think that they are the sort of away game that I think will suit us quite nicely, because the fans, as I say, their fans will demand that they attack, and that should leave some holes at the back for us to exploit with our better players.
And you'd imagine, Alfie, there might be a bit more positivity this week with some players coming in this time. If we talked about the negativity ahead of the QPR game, then there might be a little bit of a feel-good factor going into this one at the weekend, all being well.
Yeah, I think, like you say, there will be incomings for sure. Russell Martin said there will be, and I believe him. And if there isn't, I think he'll be very, very disappointed. And I would not really do the manager I want to disappoint right now, because I think the project's going quite well. So I'd want to give him whatever it is he wants if I was in charge. I think the who stays will be even bigger, though. I think if we get to 12:30 on Saturday and Carl Walker-Peters is still here, Kamaldeen Suleiman is still here, Che Adams is still here, I think it's a really good window, to be fair. I think you would have probably at most hoped for keeping 3 or 4 of the big guns. I think Ward-Prowse, Livramento, Lavia, these guys, you can sort of get over it. Tella was a bit of a surprise. So I think there could be a real good feel factor. The trips to the North East we had last year weren't that good, were they? Looking back, I think we sort of got hammered in the league in May. To be fair, Newcastle were a good side, but the Cup semi-final was a disappointing effort, apart from Che Adams smacking one in for about 30 yards. I thought Nathan Jones probably managed that one. Slightly bizarrely putting James Bree in for his full debut about 24 hours after he'd signed.
Nathan Jones managing things bizarrely, surely.
Well, there you go. Yeah, who'd have thought? I mean, much maligned.
Is this your the furthest trip north, isn't it?
I don't know. Is it? What's further, Middlesbrough or Sunderland?
New Zealand.
Sunderland's further north.
Is it? Well, there you go. Yeah.
I mean, we did win 4-0 back. Was it 2017 when they finished bottom with like
with a couple
24 points? Yeah, did Shane Long score as well from memory?
Yeah.
So, yeah, we've had some good games against them. Going to get some score predictions from you. I'll start with you, Alfie. Are you going to go with another 2-1?
Yeah, it should be, shouldn't it? Really, but I think that it's a tough one. I've got none right so far. I don't know about you, Glen and Steve. I don't know if I've got a single one right. I've got some results, but no scores.
I think we all predicted a win last week. Ben, to be fair to Ben, said 2-1. So credit where that's due. Yeah, I don't know. I think we all had us down for a 3-1 win yesterday.
We'll go at 1-1 on this occasion. I think it's a long way to go, and I think if you get out there with a point, I think you probably take that at the start we've had.
Okay, Glenn.
I think we'll still carry on being optimistic. Sunderland games are quite close. Usual logic, we haven't got a clean sheet in us still. So I'll go for a 2-1 win.
Okay, and Steve?
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm going to go for the same score as Glenn for basically the same reasons. If we can't keep a clean sheet against QPR, then we're not going to keep a clean sheet against a somewhat better team. So, but we've I mean, as we've seen, we've found ways to score goals in every game so far, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. So yeah, 2-1 win.
That's a fair point. If you're watching live, don't forget to stick your predictions in the comments because it's always good to see those. A couple of other bits before we finish. I want to get on to just transfers and what's going to be potentially a busy week for you, Alfie. Anyway, can you just bring us up to date on Che Adams and where we are at the moment? Obviously not in the squad at the weekend, but it doesn't sound like that's advancing anymore. Is that one you think might get done, or would you say that's 50-50?
Yeah, I sort of mentioned it a little bit earlier. I think it probably is 50-50 to be fair. Like it wasn't. Although Russell might have said on Friday actually when I asked him where Che Adams and Nathan Tella were, he said that if Che's not in the squad tomorrow, it's because something has advanced. And then when it got to tomorrow and he wasn't in the squad, it turned out it wasn't because something had advanced, and it was because the mentality. They agreed on that, so that was a little bit weird. But as I understand it, there's nothing right now that's done. I said this last week as well. Everton, probably not the destination. I mean, I shouldn't say that because if it is now, it will all be gutted. But I don't think that Everton, I think they're even signing someone else for 30 million, aren't they? So it'll be up to another Premier League club to firm up some interest. And a lot of clubs will say they're interested and not actually come forward with a bid. Nobody has yet. So if I was Che, I'd probably just sign the contract, take the 3 years job security, take what I can presume is a little bit of a pay rise. I can only imagine. Take the seniority in the dressing room and score a lot of goals this season rather than going to a club where you miss your first 2 1-on-1s, everyone hates you again. So I think that would be what I would do. But we'll have to see.
It is an interesting one though, Glenn, isn't it? When you think back, and they've talked about bringing players in, and obviously the aim is to get promoted this year with a squad that is able to compete in the Premier League. The goal is still to be top 10. He's not a Premier League striker, right? So if he was, we wouldn't be in the Championship.
Problem is you don't get to the top level not believing that you're a top level player. The reason he's got this far is because he believes in himself clearly, so he probably won't agree with that.
Yeah, I always thought Che has the potential to be a Premier League striker, but his goal return, I don't think he's scored 10 goals in the Premier League for us in a season. I think he's been sort of 8 and 9, and but bear in mind we've been ropey. So as a team,
charitable description.
We've not been great. We had the one season where where no one went to the games, where Danny Ings scored a lot of goals. We had that one season where we were half decent. I think his record over the last 4 years, you would probably say we would hope to have better if we got back to the Premier League. But I don't think you can really look that far ahead. You look at the makeup of the Championship. It's a tough league to get out of, and we have to look at this season. And this season, Che would be good for 20 goals, wouldn't he? You've got to think if he stays.
It's everything else around the goals, isn't it, Glenn? Because you saw on Saturday that the attack just looked nothing really with
absolutely. He's the only player we've got who I think is comfortable playing up against central defenders and dishing out the stick that you need to dish out in order to help the team progress up the pitch. So yeah, I mean, if he goes, they absolutely have to replace him, and I think they have to replace him with a proper number 9. Which is maybe why we didn't go for Ward-Prowse in the end. But I don't know. I'm guessing we don't really know how far the move for Adams is from other clubs. I mean, from what we're led to believe, Everton only wanted to pay a couple of 100,000 up front, but then they're looking at signing this guy for 30 million. So it's bizarre.
It's all make believe money, isn't it, on their part?
Yeah, it's a bit strange. It's it's like Liverpool haggling over the Lavia for the sake of a couple of $100,000, and then
100 million
and then offering 100 million for another player. It's all a bit bizarre. So I mean, we would absolutely have to replace Che if he goes. I hope he doesn't. I hope he's still here. I mean, it doesn't. The club would have a hard job, I think, not selling him and letting him run his contract down. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. But would Che want to sign for 3 years? I don't know. I think there's lots of moving parts to this, and we'll just have to see how it plays out. I'm more interested in who they bring in to replace Nathan Tella as well. Do they need to if Sulemana stays? I've never really considered Sulemana as an option for this season, because I just assumed he don't want to be
gone. Yeah.
But he's still here as it stands. And the big one is obviously Walker Peters. I noticed we got linked with Johnson from West Ham during the week, who is the sort of player who, I mean, I thought he was decent. I'm surprised he's not a first team regular at West Ham, and he's played right, left, and centre back. So that one wouldn't surprise me. But the main thing for me is that we cannot have all these. If Che goes, we can't have all these players, all these goals leave, and not replace them. I mean, do you remember when we got rid of Pella and Mane in the same season and replaced them with Charlie Austin and Nathan Redmond, who both had their moments, but they're never going to score the amount of goals. And back in the day, and even more recently, we basically replaced Ings and Brozier with Sekou. It's just you cannot do that. And goals and the sort of player that score goals, they cost money. So you don't get those on loan because people don't want to loan them out. So they are going to have to spend some money. And I think I tweeted out during the week, we've kind of broken even on transfer fees now over the last year and a half with what we've spent and what we've recouped. But there's a load going on. I mean, what's happening with Tall Joe Aribo, Gineppo, McCarthy, Lianco,
well, the list of people we want out is still quite a long
list. There's lots going on. So Alfie's going to be busy.
And another picture of Lianco at a different airport tonight. You spotted, Steve. He's been racking up the air miles.
Yes, he seems to be in Doha.
Right.
Signing for a Qatari club apparently. As posted by that club's Twitter account. So I assume there'll be some sort of announcement in due course. Unless it all kind of falls apart again, like it did in Turkey.
I have found it really bizarre, Alfie, with like managers announcing signings before the clubs do. Like was it Eddie Howe this week basically said in his press conference about Ryan Fraser, it's like, oh right, okay, and that's like the first thing that we've heard about it. And this whole thing about we can't talk about it until it's happened, it seems like there's a real shift this year. People just getting on with it and admitting stuff.
Yeah, it's very much a sort of a new wave management, I think, rather than keeping your cards close to chest, just sort of tell everything. I mean, I spoke to obviously Russell Martin on Friday, and I asked him, I said, how was Will Smallbone, basically, my final question of the press conference in the embargo section, which you haven't seen yet. So how was Will Smallbone? He said, oh yeah, he signed a new contract. And he went, oh wait, was I meant to say that? And I was asking about his fitness, and obviously I agreed with the club then to keep that news quiet until the announcement, which we're expecting tomorrow. And obviously then it went all over the internet the following day, which is a bit of a shame. But yeah, I mean, that was I was asking about, is he fit to play on the weekend? And I got told that he's signed a new deal. So yeah, I think certain managers are just happy to talk about it, aren't they? But
I like it. Serum. It's great.
Yeah, from my perspective, it's brilliant. I mean, Nathan Jones was excellent, for honesty, and now we've got Russell Martin, who's just as honest as well.
It's quite refreshing. Couple of other bits. Great start for the women today, Steve. I don't know if you saw was it 4-1 the final score?
4-1 at Lewis. Excellent win that, given that Lewis were a side that troubled us last season. 2-2 draw down there in the corresponding game last season, and they did a number on us at St Mary's at the back end of the season with a 1-0 win. So yeah, to go down there and score 4 kind of hints that we might have kind of turned the corner a little bit, because last season defense was excellent, but we couldn't score goals. I think we basically only averaged just over a goal a game, if that. But defensively, we were brilliant. So, if we can get some more goals in the team, as today's result and performance suggests they've got it, then yeah, great. They've got a good opportunity. Only 2 teams won in this first round of games. Us and
Top of the
Blackburn.
league.
Yep. So we are top of the league on goal difference. Blackburn won 1-0 last night, I think, against Birmingham, which is a very good result for them. But we play Blackburn at home next week. So basically, the only 2 100% records head to head in week 2. So
Something's got to give.
Yeah, that'll be interesting. So kind of monitor sort of that would be a sort of good benchmark, I think, to see kind of whether we're likely challengers. I mean, it's still nonsense with only 1 team going up, but we'll see how it goes.
The other thing is, for the first time ever, we've decided to enter the Football Content Awards. An awards do. Could you imagine us all getting dressed up in like black tie and going off to an award? Anyway, we would love your support. So if you enjoy TSP, maybe you've just been listening the last couple of weeks, maybe you've been with us since the start, we would love you to vote for us. It's the best podcast. You have to go to the Football League category. We put a link on all the socials. And am I right in thinking, Glenn, it turns out you can vote more than once? Someone discovered this week.
I can't confirm or deny that, but I think it's possible.
With different
apparently VPNs exist. Who knew?
Oh, good. Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll see. We'll put the link on the socials again. On that note, that's pretty much it for this week. Don't forget you can follow Total Saints Podcast on Facebook and Twitter. It's at Total Saints Pod. We're also on Instagram and Threads, so give us a little follow on there. And as you'll know, if you're watching this podcast on Sunday evening, we live stream TSP every week to Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, and YouTube. So if you're watching on YouTube, do make sure you hit the subscribe button, and then you'll be the first to see all of our new videos. We do love to hear from you as well throughout the week. You can drop us a DM on any of the socials, or you can send us an email via the website. And as I mentioned at the start, we're on Patreon, and that's where you can support the podcast with a monthly contribution. It's patreon.com/Total Saints Podcast. There's 4 tiers on there. They range from £5 to £20 per month. And each of the tiers comes with its own perks, including weekly shouts for those that are in our Francis Benali and our Mick Shannon tiers. So a huge thank you, as always, to Dave Melton, Mark Atkins, Andy Hollis, Matt Hall, Anthony Thompson, Saints in Exile, and Gavin Ford in the Francis Benali tier. And also to Colt Baker, Dave Ernsberger, Ed Busy, Nick Higston, Phil Cook, Matt Rose, and Nick Reed in the Mick Shannon tier. Thank you to Steve. Thanks to Glenn. Thanks to Alfie. Is there a blog on Friday, Alfie? You can be doing like transfer updates. Is that the best?
There'll be. Yeah, I'll be up at 7 in till 1 in. So there'll be a blog all day for sure.
Good. Well, let's hope there's loads of positive news. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you again